start. I think people really struggle to get started. And, I will say that action is the most important thing. So, if you're tossing or thinking about an idea, and you can't quite decide, like, you just gotta go, and you gotta go fast, and you're gonna like bump into walls, and then you go, oh, okay, we're going this direction now. And like, that's all normal, right? Like, startups aren't normal. I think that's the other thing that a lot of people fail to understand. It's like, these are these really weird experiments, and you just have to test and test and test and see what works. And when you keep that feedback loop tight and you just keep on going. But
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as a CEO and founder of Miller IP Law, where we focus on helping startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com. We are always here to help. Now, today we have another great guest on the podcast, Lauren Chitwood. And to give a bit of a background on Lauren, so she was wanting to be an entrepreneur for a while, went to school and graduated in 2008 with a public relations degree from University of Kentucky. And after graduation, kind of started getting into luxury events for kind of business related and events where it's a bit of the higher scale or upscale or luxury side, and scaled that business, grew it for a while until 2016 when she sold it. And then was looking for something new. And the intent, what part of it was to take her weekends back, and may or may not have ever happened, and she could chime in on that. But that was part of the intent. Also was looking for something new that was fun. Met a co-founder that was in the hospitality business as well, and was looking or did a lot in the goods and wines and those type of festivals, and started looking into different companies and partnered with different brands, and kind of was looking for that. And also reflecting back on doing a lot of the luxury events they'd done, and saying there was a demand for spiritless drinks, or in other words, non-alcoholic drinks that were for spirits, and how that was often in demand, and how they could start to build and form a company around that. So with that, formed a company and has been growing it ever since, which is now spiritless.com. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Lauren.
thank you, Devin. Thank you very much.
So I gave the brief 30-second run through of a much longer journey. So why don't you take us back in time a bit and tell us a little bit about how it got started, and then kind of graduating in 2008.
Yeah, well, so as you summarized, so I'm a 2008 grad, and I think as many graduates at that time, as you're coming out of school and looking at the job market, you're not exactly sure what's there for you. And I was really sure I didn't want to go back to school, and I was also really sure that I didn't want to sell banner ads online, and that sort of felt like maybe my options. And so I said, you know what? I think I've got a network that will still be entertaining despite the times. And, I think that I have the organizational skills and the know-how to start an event business. So jumped right in and was wonderfully naive, which I think is an important skill for many entrepreneurs, because if you knew everything that you needed to know, you probably wouldn't do it, right? Because there's all those problems you run into. And yeah, ended up scaling that business, and I sold it in 2016.
Now, one question I'll get into, because you touched on it a bit. So you come out with public relations saying, okay, I want to do something. First of all, 2008, to your point, is probably not the best time, or at least in quotes, the best time to graduate, in the sense that starting to hit the crash and the housing market, and things are starting to be a downturn. And yet you're still graduating. You still have to figure out a way to make an income, make a living. So how did you kind of land on the luxury events and kind of doing that in the business space? Was it, hey, I'll do something and this sounds exciting, and just light bulb moment, or how did you kind of land on that?
Yeah, I think it just felt accessible to me. I think as you look at other businesses, and certainly something that we're very familiar with now in Spiritless is, just the cost of entry into a lot of these worlds or new businesses, takes some real capital. And what I liked about the event business is that it was a relatively accessible business for me from a financial perspective to get going. And so that was really, that would just, an instinctual idea for my skill set was really what said, like, I'm going to try this.
So you land on that, and I agree with your comment that you made that I think every entrepreneur has to be a bit of an overly optimistic or a bit naive in the sense if you really understood all the possible things that could go wrong, all the things that you don't know, all the hidden costs, all the other things, you would probably never get into it because you'd be scared off way too early on. And yet it presents a lot of opportunities because you don't know these things, that you're willing to dive in, get going, and you can oftentimes figure those out. So I tend to agree that there needs to be a bit of optimism. Now, you grew that. It would have been about 8 years that you were in the luxury event and kind of that, luxury event business. Now, as you're getting towards the end of that, you decided to sell. Now, was that out of a matter of you had somebody come along and make you the proverbial offer you can't refuse, where you're saying, hey, I want to take a break. This is, the market's drying up. What, kind of what prompted the shift or that sell the business and to go on to something else?
It was an offer, it was an offer at just the right time too, probably, if I was being honest, which is, I had a young family at the time, and, there were 30 weekends a year that I probably wasn't sleeping and running around, dealing with some unforeseen, crisis, because that's just really what the live event world is, right? Just dealing with whatever happens, and the best laid plans, sometimes go awry. So it was a really good timing for me. I was actively already thinking about what was my next thing. What did I need to do? I think the event business, although it's a wonderful business, it is for the young. I think that, I knew that although I still consider myself young, but I knew that it wasn't something I wanted for my whole life. And so, I'd already kind of had that realization. And when the offer came, it was like, well, yes, it was great. It was just great.
No, and I think that is usually most of the time, because people can make an offer on your business. A lot of times you say, no, I want to keep it or I'm enjoying it. But a lot of times it's in that timing of, hey, I'm looking to take back a little bit of my personal life, family life. I'm, maybe a bit worn out, and all of those things kind of combine and say, okay, it's the right time. So they make the offer. So now they make the offer, they buy out the business, you sell that. Now what did you do? Did you immediately go to your next, great idea, and then, start looking for business, say, hey, I'm going to take some time off. Somebody else approach you with the idea. Kind of, how did you, now that you've sold the business, how did you kind of tackle that next phase?
Yeah. And so, I probably took very little time off. I think in hindsight, I think it felt like an extraordinary amount of time, but I think it was probably like 3 months that was the gap, which is kind of laughable, but probably,
I don't know, for, if you're always go, and you're doing a startup, a small business, that amount of time you're sitting there saying, okay, I've got a lot of
it
time.
felt like an eternity.
What am I going to do? It always like, and I'm kind of the same way. I always like, it'd be nice one time to just have weekends and nights where I don't have to think of anything. I turn my brain off. And then I'm like, yeah, and I'd probably do that. And if I were to ever step back, I'd probably get bored. And in a month or two, I'd be right back to where I'm at, because, that's, I think, a lot of times how you're wired.
Yeah, I don't think I turned my brain off for a second, to be honest. I mean, I think that I was already incubating what was the potential next thing. And so I knew that I knew I wanted my next business, if I was going to stay in the hospitality and event lane, which I felt like I had a lot of power in. I felt like it was something that I really intimately understood. I also knew that I really wanted to get away from the emotion of taking someone or an individual's money in return for an event, because that's also just like, it's a roller coaster. Corporate dollars are much more transactional, right? Like, this has nothing to do with someone's ego or, whatever they're kind of trying to express. And so, I knew that I was looking for something that was outside of the leisure business. I also knew that I was looking for something that I could do with a partner. I think that, although being a solopreneur, there are benefits to it, but there are also just like, I will never do a business by myself ever again. And so all the while I'm, just kind of incubating ideas, thinking about what's next, thinking about what a partner would be and who I should look for. And then, by another stroke of maybe luck or, supreme manifestation, I met my co-founder in my second business, Abby Ferguson, who's actually a co-founder in Spiritless as well.
So now, how did you guys connect? Was it somebody you already knew? You had to
Yeah,
happen to meet in a coffee shop and hit it off? You
yeah.
went to a
It
business
was
event, or kind of how
our
did you make
network
that connection?
our networks pushed us together. So it was interesting. So Abby has this great history in food and beverage, and so she was on the founding team of the New York City Food and Wine Festival when it came up from South Beach. From there, she went down to Atlanta and was on the founding team of the Atlanta Food and Wine Festival, which also sold in 2016. She happened to be in Louisville. Her husband is a native, and it was funny because for months both of us kept hearing our network and our pals say, you should really meet so and so, or you should meet
Hmm.
Lauren, or you should meet Abby. And it was really serendipitous. Just on an evening out, she was actually walking into a doorway I was walking out of, and everybody said, wait, hold on, we've been trying to connect you two. Wait. And so we literally stood and talked in this doorway, and exchange phone numbers. And then from there, we call it our dating period. We had a lot of lunches and got to know one another and talked about what could be, and how we would blend her experience and the value that she brought versus with everything that I knew and had experienced through business. So yeah, that's how it happened.
No, and that definitely, that's always interesting how you connect with people, and whether it's clients or founders or co-founders or business partners. It's not necessarily the way that it's not like in the movies or in the television show where it's just a perfect match made in heaven, but it's oftentimes, different or interesting ways that how you make the connection. So you guys did, you made that connection, you finally connected, you went through the dating period, which I think is smart on everybody's end, in the sense that once it is a lot like dating and marriage, in the sense that a business partner, you're working with them for a long period of time. You're going to have your ups and downs. You're going to have the business is going to go through struggles. You're probably going to have your fights, and you have a lot of joint assets. So there's a lot of overlap. And I think to make sure that that's a good fit is absolutely, makes sense. So now, as you kind of go through that dating period, whose idea was it, or how did you guys land on this spiritless kind of an idea?
Yeah, so what we started a company called Olio, and what Olio did, and this was the second business, and Spiritless is the third in my life cycle. So Olio essentially connected the trade and the consumer to big beverage conglomerates and the brands that fell underneath them. And so Abby has the most amazing Rolodex. I mean, if you are a heavy hitter in the food and beverage world, she has probably worked with you and probably saved your bacon at some point. So we really use those contacts as a way to do experiential events, to do all kinds of marketing campaigns and marketing initiatives by being able to kind of layer on that Rolodex, and that is kind of an additional perk, or additional angle, if you will. And really where Spiritless was ultimately born is that we kept solving the same problem for all of our customers. They were calling us, and it was always an afterthought, but always urgent. And they were saying, I'm so sorry, I failed to mention this, but this is really important. We need something non-alcoholic. And can it not be, there was water, tea, coffee, juice, nothing syrup based, there was this nothing in a can. There was this enormous list of qualifiers. And as we time and time again went to try to solve that problem, we were really struggling to do it in a way that was creative, or that wasn't just water or something that was juice based. And so that's really the aha moment for when Spiritless was born, is just solving our own problems and our customers' problems.
No, and that definitely makes sense. And it's interesting how oftentimes the customers will come and tell you what they want. Some people are good. If you're a good entrepreneur, you'll listen. It's always a balance, in the sense, if you get some customers, they tell you it's what they want, but they're not willing to pay for it, or they're not willing to actually do anything about it. And this is kind of, yeah, this would be a nice to have, and they keep telling you, and then you go do it, and you're not, nobody, it's a failed business because nobody wants to pay for it. But all the other times, if your customers are consistently wanting it and already paying you for it, it presents an opportunity for you. Now, one question I'd have is, so you have Olio, which is the other business. Did you guys say, hey, we're going to run these two businesses side by side, we're going to spin this out, it's going to start out as one business, or kind of we're going to close one down, close the other business down because this is a better opportunity? Kind of, how did you make the transition?
Yeah, so we incubated it for a while in Olio. We had kind of a separate half of the world that was working and thinking about this, doing some market research. We were kind of plugging away a little bit on the sidelines, and then when we really were able to just assess the size and the scope of the opportunity, we just said, this is ours. This is ours to miss. And so we essentially we closed that business and went full force into Spiritless.
Well, that kudos to you guys. Now, one or follow-up question. I have lots of fun or questions.
Yeah.
When you do that, what period of time was that over where you kind of had the idea, you started to transition it, test it out, see if it works before you made the full jump and shut down the other business? Was this over a matter of a week, a month, a year, 5 years? Kind of what time?
It was probably between 3 and 6 months, which, and I think that one of the things that I honestly felt is even, there was also some other strain and some other optics happening, which is that for me, I really desired to be out of a key man business, but I found myself in another key man business, which is that, Abby and I were really kind of the intellectual capital of that business that ultimately, scaling it again and having an asset that probably really lived outside of us on a day-to-day was going to be really challenging. And that was becoming apparent. We were still kind of on that client hamster wheel, which is just like, every single day there's just a new thing. And that's one of the challenges of services-based businesses. So, I was tossing with that reality all the while we were working on Spiritless, and, to have something that, while certainly team is enormously valuable, but an asset that can really live outside of me was something that I was highly interested in. And so as we were incubating that, I was also just saying, like, I think this is really where I want to be.
No, and that definitely makes sense. And so now you guys, you figure out, okay, we do that for a period of time. We have a transition. We say, hey, the bigger opportunity is here. We're more excited about it. We don't have to be on the hamster wheel of always trying to generate new business and clients, and we can focus on the product and kind of sales on that. So you go through all of that and you jump into Spiritless. And this was, I think you said either your third or second or third startup. And it was the other founders. Now as you get into it, was it easier after doing it multiple rounds and already working with your partner? Would it still present issues? Would the business just take off and skyrocket? Was it bumpy as you're trying to, get people to accept the product, or how did that launch go?
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, the launch has gone incredibly well. We're so fortunate. I think that, although we had touched beverage in so many ways over the course of our careers, there is an enormous hurdle on creating a liquid that then goes to live on a shelf. And I think that's also one of those things when I start thinking about the beautiful naivete of entrepreneurship. Had we known how hard it was going to be to create a process, to bring it to scale, to navigate all the regulatory nuance with making a high proof spirit and then turning it into a non-alcoholic product and meeting the food and alcohol regulations and then the FDA, there's so much nuance to it. And those are things that we sort of knew, but then as you live it is so challenging. So I will say that we have experienced success that is so far beyond my expectation, especially for the amount of time that we have been in business, but at the same time have had pains and hurdles that were completely not what we expected as well. But I guess if I had to pick the problem, having more supply than we have, or having more demand than we have supply for is probably the problem that I would choose.
That's always a much better. It can still be a problem. I think that people say, oh, you have sales and now you still have to keep up with demand, but it's always a much more fun and better problem to solve than, hey, we don't have any demand now. How do we make a business out of that? And so now you do that and you kind of, take that over the last few years. You guys have been building it. You've been growing it. You've been seeing success and finding that place in the marketplace. Now looking a bit forward, kind of the next 6 to 12 months, where do you see things headed?
Yeah, so we're really fortunate that we've got this wonderful national footprint now. So, bottles are over all 50 states, and that's in off premise, on premise. Also, we're shipping, of course, direct to consumer. So, bottles are showing up on customers' doorsteps and they're enjoying. I think when we start looking at the next 6 to 12 months, what we're really seeing is, of course, an expansion of that footprint, especially in the on premise. Obviously, being in this kind of new almost post COVID world, we're fortunate there's just enormous pent up demand, in the hospitality space that I think we're really starting to feel come back in a meaningful way, which is really exciting. And then we're also, our eyes are on the prize when we start thinking about future innovations. So our first product is Kentucky 74. It's a non-alcoholic spirit for bourbon cocktails. And we're also working on a product that will be a similar product, but for tequila based cocktails. And that'll be launching in the second half of this year. For us, also size is an innovation. So we're thinking about smaller sizes, looking at doing, specialty mailing experiences and a variety of other things. But right now it's just frankly, like, we are still just making sure that we've got the capacity to make all of this stuff, because holy moly, people are buying it.
That's awesome. It sounds like a lot of fun opportunities to move forward. And it's always, whenever you're looking in the future, it's kind of, how much do we expand? How much do we try new things? How much do we stay with our core product? Do we do more product offerings? Do we go to different verticals, or, hey, we go to different verticals that can sometimes hurt the brand? So it's always interesting to see kind of all the different options available, especially as you're seeing success and kind of where things are headed.
Yeah.
Well, as we start to wrap up, I always have 2 questions at the end of each podcast. So we'll go ahead and jump to those now. First question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what did you learn from it?
Oh my gosh. I will say, along my journey, probably the worst business decisions that I've made is not correcting a poor hiring decision as quickly as I should have. And I will say that I've learned that lesson twice, and it was enough. And not to say that that it's spiritless, your head's on the chopping block immediately, but I think that being an empathetic person, sometimes we hesitate too much to make decisions that we know the answers to. And so I will say that I'm much more highly focused on, when I know it's not right, I've got the power to say it, and I'm much more aggressive in remedying those issues really quickly.
No, it's a lesson I had to learn as well. And, it's, first of all, I always found that, when you're a founder, co-founder, an entrepreneur, you always think, and at least I did, and I won't say always, a lot of people think, hey, everybody is going to work as hard as me, and everybody's going to be involved with the business. And as you start to grow and as you start to make it higher, you come to find out not everybody works quite as many hours as you, or quite as excited. And to find those individuals that are really excited about the business isn't quite as easy as it might sound. And then the other one is it's hard, especially if you're a small business, is you get to know the people, and, whether or not they're doing a job, whether or not they're good employee for the business, you still develop a relationship with them. They're in the trenches, they're with you. And so that one is one that, I think is a difficulty that a lot of people hit into as they start to get into entrepreneurship. They hire people, and that it takes a couple times before, or even more sometimes, to get it right, to figure out how to hire, who to hire, what to look for, what to not look for, what are the flags, because it's a much more complex problem. So I definitely that makes sense.
And when it's good, it's so good. And I think that's the thing. Like, you got to hold on to that idea of, like, I know this is painful, but the right person in this role is just like,
it makes a huge difference.
It makes a huge difference. And so you got to keep your eye on the prize, right? Like, this short-term pain is really an investment in a long-term gain. And, culture is everything. So.
No, and the one other thing I'll add, and then we'll jump to the second question, which is, I think sometimes, especially the temptation with the startup or small businesses, you get so busy, you have so many things to do, you get a demand, you need to bring someone on, and you tend to hire too quickly, in the sense that you just need to have, you think, oh, I just need somebody that can do this position, and you don't take the time to vet the people or get the right people. And those are usually the more costly hires, because then you end up having to go redo it anyway, let them go after you already brought them on, trained them and everything, and you have to go refine that right person. So sometimes slowing it down has a big benefit.
Yep. It's, it's hard either way because yes, things are moving fast. I hear you.
So now I'll jump to the second question, which is if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what'd be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Just start. I think people really struggle to get started. And, I will say that action is the most important thing. So, if you're tossing or thinking about an idea, and you can't quite decide, like you just gotta go and you gotta go fast and you're gonna like bump into walls and then you go, oh, okay, we're going this direction now. And like, that's all normal, right? Like startups aren't normal. I think that's the other thing that a lot of people fail to understand. It's like these are these really weird experiments, and you just have to test and test and test and see what works. And when you keep that feedback loop tight and you just keep on going. But I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs or want to be entrepreneurs I talk to, and they're really immobilized by the unknowns, and that's you can't be, like, you just have to go, and just always be testing and keep your eyes open.
No, and I like that. And interesting, I think we're coming up on a couple hundred episodes. I can't remember when this will air or what number it is exactly, but I'd probably say out of all the entrepreneurs I've talked with that have been on the podcast and that I work with my business, that's probably the number one answer. That, it's usually a variation of, hey, get started earlier, don't make up excuses or get started now. But it's interesting that it's many different industries and many different journeys and everything, people. That's the one thing, because people oftentimes, you make too many excuses or you make a reason why, and I think mentioned a little bit on the podcast before, is you can always make your excuse. When I started out, it could have been, hey, you're still in school, so I got to wait till I graduate. Once I graduate, I got to get a little bit of experience, and then once I get a little experience, now I started a family and I have kids and I have responsibilities. And then you get in and say, oh, well, I'll do it when I'm older. And then when you get older, you say, well, I've done it for so long, I'm too old, or I can't, it's too late. And there's always a reason to not start now, or the economy's not good, or I'm waiting for a different change in whatever it is. And it's always an excuse, and there's always a reason not to get started, and yet just get started.
Just do it. Freaking rip the Band-Aid off, man. Yeah.
That's right. Well, now as we wrap up, if people want to connect up with you, they want to be a customer or a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out or find out more?
Yeah, so obviously you can visit and purchase Spiritless at spiritless.com. And then I am available by email. So Lauren@spiritless.com.
All right. Well, I definitely encourage everybody to check out the website, support the business, and reach out to Lauren if you have a question, whether it's any or all of the above. Great that she's available. Well, thank you again, Lauren, for coming on. It's been it's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you have your own journey to tell, we'd love to share your journey. So just go to inventiveguest.com and apply to be on the podcast, and we'd love to share a couple more things as listeners. One, make sure to click subscribe so you know when all of our awesome episodes come out. And two, leave us a review so new people can find out about us as well. Last but not least, if you ever need help with your patents, trademarks, or anything else, feel free to reach out to us. Just go to strategymeeting.com and grab some time with us to chat. Thank you again, Lauren. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Awesome. Thanks, Devin.